From 2 Keto LLC, it's Keto Woman Podcast with Daisy Brackenhall.
Hello Keto Lovelies, I'm Daisy Brackenhall and I've spent most of my life struggling with my weight and confidence and have always had a difficult relationship with food. Even when I finally got to my target weight, after weight loss surgery and eating low carb, I couldn't maintain it and I was miserable. Keto has given me the freedom to fall in love with food again, without the constant gain, loss, guilt, virtue cycle of before. Health and happiness is where it's at now, running on fat. Welcome to the Keto Woman Podcast. Each week I'll be chatting to inspirational women, maybe even the odd man, to discover the secrets to their success so that I can share them with you. So what is keto? Keto is a way of eating that enables you to switch your body's main fuel source from sugar to fat. Who doesn't want to be a fat burner, right? But how do we achieve this? A great place to start is by keeping carbs to 20 grams or less per day. So things like leafy greens and above ground vegetables, plus some nuts and seeds and the incidental carbs you find in things like dairy. Moderate protein scaled to your lean body mass, and then fat to satiety. Once you're in the swing of things, you can tweak it to suit you. Make your own personalised keto. I'll be asking my guest each week what their keto looks like to show you just how flexible and fabulous this way of eating can be. I'm not a doctor, and most of my guests won't be either, so we can't give you medical advice. It's always best to work with your own doctor because they know you and your medical history and so have access to the bigger picture. This week's extraordinary women are Liz Myers and Brenda Zorn. Liz is a 43-year-old computer nerd who has been obese her entire life. In late 2014, she was diagnosed with lipedema, which led her to concentrate on losing weight with little success. She went full keto in March 2017. She lives with her amazingly supportive husband, 2 dogs and a parrot. Liz spends most of her free time being unladylike, riding an overgrown dirt bike or snowmobiles. Between seasons, she can be found in the shed surrounded by tools and bits of motorcycles. She particularly enjoys making men uncomfortable when they ask when she's going to get a real bike or give her unsolicited advice on tyre pressure. Brenda has 4 years invested in the ketogenic and fasting communities and has guided many to better health. She cured her own type 2 diabetes with a combination of ketogenic diet and fasting, and it has become her lifelong ambition to help others recover from diabetes and obesity. She has recently started working as a nutritional educator with Dr. Jason Fung and Megan Ramos on their intensive dietary management program. Her story has appeared on the Diet Doctor website, and she has been a guest on numerous ketogenic lifestyle podcasts, including the 2 Keto Dudes and the Obesity Code. Brenda describes herself as a low-carb cooking expert, weightlifter, she can leg press 810 pounds, motorcycle enthusiast, and a bold mix of adventure and dedication. It felt like being part of an adventure film, hearing about the exploits of these 2, and the thrills and spills of deer strikes, torrential rain, and fasting challenges kept me on the edge of my seat. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to the Keto Woman Podcast. How are you doing today, Liz Myers?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to see you today. And Brenda Zorn, how are you today?
Fantastic, Daisy. Absolutely fantastic.
Brilliant. So perhaps you can just tell us a bit about yourselves. Let's start with Liz, as we've got that order. What your life was like before you found keto. What led you towards that path in the first place?
Well, I've been obese my entire life. In 2003, I was, I think, around 340 pounds, and I had gastric bypass surgery. And I did pretty well until the early 20 teens. I started putting on a little bit of weight due to physical. I had head injuries. And I wanted to start losing some weight. And when my husband and I were planning a cross-country motorcycle trip, I knew I needed to be fit for that. We were going to be on the road for a month.
So did you get to your target weight initially with after having the bypass surgery?
I didn't really have a target weight. I just wanted to feel better. And I was in much, much better condition. I was pretty much living on anti-inflammatories before the surgery. And within I think 6 months, I was off of all anti-inflammatories and was able to do much more than I had been previously.
Fantastic. But you'd found you'd started to regain the weight, or some of those inflammatory conditions had started coming back? What made you think you needed to start addressing it again?
I'd regained a little bit of weight, and I'd also had I was diagnosed with lipedema in 2014, which is an inflammatory disorder. And that's something that if you're not careful, it can get very bad. And that scared me. I didn't want to lose mobility. So that really got me moving to try to clean up my health.
Yeah, can you just explain briefly what that is for people who don't know?
Lipedema is a fat storage disorder. It's characterized by women who are, usually you'll be 2, 3, 4 sizes larger on the bottom than on top. It's typically from the waist down, but some people have their arms are also involved. Mine are. They don't know what causes it. They know it's hormonal. And typically you'll start seeing signs of it when a girl hits puberty, and then it'll start getting worse either around the childbirth or around the early stages of menopause, which is when I was diagnosed with it.
So was this something that you'd always had, and it just was in the very early stages, or something that only started later on?
Yep. Nope. I'd always had it. I remember one of the earliest signs of it is fat pads on the inside of your thighs. And I remember being, like 11 and 12 and getting that. And my legs, I always had very chunky calves, always. And it got to the point, we were actually on a motorcycle trip, and we were down south, and I was bit by a bug that I had a really bad allergic reaction to, and my legs swelled up so badly from it that my motorcycle pants, which are huge, couldn't even fit over my calves. They were tight on it. So that led me to go to the doctor, and he explained to me that I had lipedema, and that affects the lymph flow in the legs. And so when I have allergic reactions, my legs will just get huge.
So again, it's another issue with inflammation. So the more you can do to lower that excess inflammation, the better it's going to be.
Yes.
So it was this combination then of regaining a bit of weight, but it sounds like really actually that was quite a minor issue. It was these other things that really made you need to focus on doing something.
Yes.
And so why keto? How did you end up there?
Well, when we were getting ready for the trip, I did the typical reduce calories, going to the gym. I knew I needed to get stronger. And I started I'd be fine for a month or two, and then I'd start having major energy issues. I'd just be exhausted by early afternoon. I didn't understand what was going on. I started playing around with macros. I had done Atkins like everybody else years ago. I had done Atkins. And I tried that. Well, more like a moderate. I just increased protein, but I didn't increase fat. And I did better, but still not really great. And I'd have to go off of it for a few weeks to regain energy. And I had promised myself that when I got back from my trip, that I would concentrate on figuring out how your body uses energy. Why am I having these problems? I'm eating enough. Why don't I have any energy? During the trip, I had an accident, and I was laid up for several months afterwards. And it was during that I was home, I was bored, I was drugged out, and I kept seeing Brenda's posts about this wacky diet she was on.
So Brenda came into your life looking pretty wacky with this wacky diet when you were off your head on drugs. Good way to introduce each other.
Well, we were actually friends before that. She owns the same type of motorcycle as I do. So were actually friends, I think, since 2013, 2014?
Oh, a couple of years on the motorcycle forums, yeah.
But I saw it, and I was just like, yeah, I love doing research. Like, I got to prove this wrong. And here I am.
That's a great way to approach it, actually, isn't it? When someone comes up with something that's obviously working so well for them, but you think, well, that just looks absolutely crazy. Actually, the best way to prove to yourself that it's a good idea is, one, to try it yourself, but also to try and disprove it. And if you can't find fault with it, then it's got to be a good thing.
Yep.
Great. So we've seen how Brenda came into your life. Brenda, tell us a bit about your lead up to keto.
Well, I'm not sure how many years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And I was given the regular protocol that they give you, the American Diabetes Association diet with 140, 160 carbs a day, eat 6 meals a day. Mm-hmm. I was on the maximum dose of metformin. They had me on a couple statins. Oh my God, I'm glad I wasn't on those long. So I was doing everything they told me, and I was getting sicker, and I was gaining weight. And so I got to the point, kind of like what happened with Liz, really, the same kind of thing. I'm like, why am I gaining weight? I'm doing everything I'm supposedly supposed to do. Why is this fat on my body? Why do I have this? Why am I not able to access it? I knew it was fuel, and I didn't understand why I wasn't able to access it. So I started to experiment, and I actually experimented with intermittent fasting before I'd ever even heard of the word, and lost quite a bit of weight, but didn't understand the concept of insulin and what I was doing.
And what were the doctors saying to you in all this time? I mean, presumably, you were saying to them, look, I'm doing what you're telling me to do, and I'm gaining weight, and my numbers aren't getting better. So what's the deal here?
Blaming the victim.
You were lying. You weren't doing it how you said, or
right? Because they would ask me, have you been eating whole grains? Are you eating plenty of fruits and vegetables? Can you believe that shit? So, I was doing everything I was supposed to do, and still gaining weight. I knew something wasn't right, and it got to the point where I was on like 5 medications. I was really huge. I don't know how big I was at my largest point. I'm thinking 350. That's probably pretty accurate. Just looking at photos of myself, I could have been more. But it got to the point where they wanted to, they offered an injectable. I don't know what it was, some probably long-acting insulin. I don't know. I flipped out, and I just thought, no way, I'm not doing this. And I knew what diabetes was. I'm looking at, the specter of death. I'm looking at amputation. This is, blindness, things like that. It scared the shit out of me. But I did something that I would not recommend. I just stopped all my medication and started looking around. I found a friend of mine, Dean, told me about the book Wheat Belly, and I read that, and that quickly led me to support groups online with LCHF. And within a couple weeks, I found these crazy, insane keto people, and I wanted in. And so I started going to keto support groups online. I didn't really join. I think I joined it hoping to lose some weight, but I didn't realize that keto could reverse diabetes. I had no idea. And the reason I stayed is because it very quickly ended my cyclical depression that I'd had for decades. I've been ketogenic 4 years now. I've not had an episode of depression. It was gone within 2 weeks and has not returned. So those ketones did something to my brain. If it wasn't for that, I don't know if I would have stayed. But within 6 months, my diabetes was reversed as well. So that was, so then I really got into this because it's like, and then I found fasting probably about 2 years ago, and was able to further make myself insulin sensitive and lose even more weight. So I think I've lost about 100 pounds so far, and I have normal A1C. It's 5 now.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just seeing, I just always find it interesting to see, what led people down that path in the first place and how they found it. And it is usually something that a friend spoke about, or a book they've read, or, some film they've seen or something. There's always something that triggers that change. And that's really interesting, I think. So tell me a bit then what your keto looks like. Brenda, we've been talking to you. Let's carry on with you. What does your day-to-day look like?
What does my daily keto look like? I don't usually ever eat breakfast. Only eat lunch if I'm hungry. I've learned from Megan Ramos the importance of mixing it up. So I definitely don't deprive. I believe that on the ketogenic diet, you should never be hungry. I have figured out what satiety is when it comes to eating fat. So sometimes I'll eat lunch, definitely eat dinner. I do fast on a regular basis. Normally I fast about every other day and about a 4-day fast once a month. But I also mix that up sometimes. I recently did IDM's 42-hour protocol. I'm trying different protocols because that's what we teach our clients. So I want to know what that is like to do their different protocols. So what is my keto like? I've been doing this for 4 years. I have a keto kitchen. I love to cook. I'm able to put things together pretty easily at this point.
Give me a typical keto meal that you really enjoy. I know you like I know you like deep frying all the things, deep fried Brussels sprouts.
Yeah. Oh, definitely deep fried Brussels sprouts and deep fried broccoli of all things. The floret tops get all crispy.
Yeah, nice, because they're nice. I've done them in the oven, on really high oven, so a similar thing. They go all crispy.
And recently I discovered that lamb tallow works in the deep fryer. Beef tallow is my favorite, but lamb tallow doesn't lend that gamey flavor at all, and it works excellent in a deep fryer. So we crave that, and we probably deep fry something a couple times a week in our house. But yeah, we have pretty simple keto. I don't make real complicated recipes. I'm just too busy for that. But we'll do real simple things like a ribeye if it's in the budget, or a pork steak, which is always in the budget, or cheeseburgers, with no bun. Every now and then I might make a keto bread. The Diet Doctor has a bread that's really good. I think it's called the keto bread. But anyway, sometimes we'll make that, but that's a little bit more work, So, a lot of times it's just cabbage fried in bacon grease, and some kind of pork chop or something. It's real simple.
Exactly. We were talking a bit about this before we started. I know you made Tammy's carrot cake the other day, but it takes time, doesn't it, to make those kind of things? It's nice to do every now and then when you've got a bit of time to make a keto treat of some kind, but most of us don't do it all the time because you just haven't got the time, have you?
Right. And I'm at the point where we're really probably doing desserts maybe once a week. But yeah, I couldn't believe the amount of dishes involved just making a cake. But
Exactly.
it's fun to have it accomplished, and it's nice to know that I can if I want it. But yeah, I really don't have a lot of interest in that complicated stuff, or even the sweets. So.
Yeah, quite often I'm thinking, I'd really fancy making that. And then when the actual practicalities loom before me of what I've got to do, it's like, no, I can't be bothered.
Yep. Right.
So Liz, what about you? What is your day-to-day keto look like?
I generally, I don't eat breakfast either. Because I had gastric bypass, it's a little bit of a struggle for me to be able to eat enough at times. So rather than doing 2 meals, I really have sometimes 2 hours, usually 4-hour period that I eat as much as I can in. It's almost more like 3 or 4 smaller meals.
I see. That's interesting. I was going to ask you actually how you found that, because I had a gastric sleeve. I can't remember how many years ago now, but certainly not as long ago as you. And I found that the volume of what I can eat is almost not back to my normal, because my normal pre-surgery was way, way too much. But it's back to what I would call an average portion now. But have you found that you've been able to eat progressively more and more over time, or has the restriction really stayed in place?
It's pretty much stayed in place for me. Sometimes and I haven't done it in a long time, but before, for pizza, I wouldn't feel awesome, but I could eat a lot. But now with keto foods, I tend to not be able to eat as much. I do maximize. It's amazing that I can get 1,300 calories in a little bowl. I've kind of figured out and I do better on higher fat. So I figured out how much I need, and I guess I've just gotten used to what I need. Macadamia nuts I use quite a bit. I eat a lot of bacon. Mm-hmm. My husband actually does most of the cooking. So he'll make something, he's not keto, he doesn't have any metabolic issues, and usually he'll have a fatty sauce or a cheese sauce or something that it's easy for me to add fat to make it tailored a little more to what I need, a meat and a vegetable. So, and I've also been trying to move my eating window up because I commute. I work generally a 10-hour day, and I have an hour commute. So I don't get home until later. So I've been trying to pack everything. So I'm doing all my eating at work. Mm-hmm. It's with mixed results.
That's interesting, though, that you say you have this, because you can't eat much at once. You have an eating window where you have to sort of try and eat quite a few times to get enough in. Because I know that's a common thing, isn't it? When you start just after surgery, and the temptation is to not eat enough, because that seemingly is the whole point. I'm going to eat hardly anything, and I'm going to drop a load of weight, and of course that is what happens. But you can lose a lot of other things, like your hair and all sorts of other things in the process. So it is really important when your meal size is very restricted to make it really calorie dense, because you have to get a certain amount in to function properly, don't you?
Yep. And I just get hungry. If I don't eat enough, the next morning I'll be ravenous. So, but I don't get cranky anymore, at least. Yeah, I'm just hungry.
So you've already told us how you met and what brought you together, but let's hear a little bit about what brought you together. Now, I know nothing really about motorbikes, but tell me a bit about your bikes, because I gather there's something quite special.
Oh, yes.
We ride Kawasaki KLRs. They're basically overgrown dirt bikes. They have on-road, off-road capability.
Yeah.
It's extremely unusual for women to ride them.
Why is that?
They're very tall. They come stock with a 34-inch seat height, and they're a very tall bike so that you can go over obstacles or big bumps. But that height means that it has a very high center of gravity. So, and they also have 6-gallon gas tanks. So the center of gravity on the bike is, I think it's 36, 37 inches off the ground, which gets over on you real quick.
Yes.
It takes, you have to be able to dump it and not get scared by dumping it a number of times. A lot of people just don't want to deal with it.
What does that mean?
Just toppling over, coming to a stop. And if you don't have your ducks in a row, you're just going to go boink at the stoplight.
So you've got to be strong, basically, to be able to.
Oh, yes.
You have to be strong. You have to have balance. Having leg helps, having good long legs. But just extremely unusual. I mean, we met out of a Facebook KLR 650 owners group, and I think there might have only been one or two other women in the group at that point. I think even now there might only be 4 or 5 women in it.
Right. Yeah. I don't remember when I very first started talking to her, but of course I'm going to reach out. I reached out to several women in that group, and that was 2-3 years ago. It was quite some time ago. And we would talk occasionally. I recognized right away that she had quite a bit of mechanical knowledge of the bikes. She does a lot of the work herself. So I would go to her with questions. And I think we really started to get to know each other when I was ready to take my first solo trip, about a 400-mile trip alone. And I reached out to Liz and had some questions because, of course, I was anxious and I wanted to make sure I was safe. And she was on her 4-week road trip around the United States with her husband. And she happened to be coming near me in Minnesota on her way back to New York and offered to stop and give my bike a once-over. She didn't make it because that's when a deer hit her in South Dakota. But we stayed in really close contact since that happened. And then, of course, she started doing the keto thing. So we communicated even more because she started the ketogenic diet and it was working really well for her. I think we talked in groups, probably online too. And she saw me mention somewhere that I wanted to ride to Keto Fest.
Just let me rewind a little bit on a couple of things, actually. You did do a solo trip then at that point. This is before Keto Fest.
Yeah, it was just a day trip, 400 miles into South Dakota, and I stayed with a girlfriend for a week. But, doing a trip like that for the first time, especially, it's you need to be sure that you're ready and that the certain things on the bike have been checked. Liz and I are really up on safety, and certain things needed to be in place for my comfort, but also from a safety standpoint. If this went wrong, if that went wrong, what do I need to bring with? What do I need to have with me?
Exactly. So a good test round for Keto Fest. But the other thing I wanted to go back, because it got dropped into the conversation there, but it sounds a bit extreme. Being hit by a deer, Liz? that sounds like it's a big enough deal if you get hit by a deer in a car, but on a bike? Tell me what happened there, because that sounds pretty big.
We generally had a policy of being off the road by any time it starts getting dusky. But we'd run into a really bad Midwest storm. I'd never experienced a Midwest storm before. So we lost a couple hours because we actually had to backtrack and take shelter for the storm. And we got to the town that we were planning on staying in, and I didn't feel it was safe. I work at a homeless shelter. I've worked with the homeless. I've worked in risky situations most of my life. And the fact that I felt uncomfortable in this town really, so we decided we found the next closest place with a hotel, a little bit larger, and said, we can get there before dark. Let's just go. the sun wasn't setting yet or anything, but we have communicators, helmet communicators. So we had it open, and I was looking for a place to pull over on the right side of the road, and my husband was watching the shoulder on the left. And I decided I gave up on trying to find a place to pull over, and I sat down and looked up, and there's a deer coming right down the center line at me. He said he saw it because the way the roads are there, you have the road, and then there's no side to it. It just goes right down. So this deer was like 5 feet below road level, probably off to the side a little bit. And he said that he saw its head come up, and it just took off at me, that it charged me, I guess. I know I lost braking time because I saw it. I'm like, deer, don't do that. It just took me a minute to process of what was happening. And then I remember trying to decide which way I could swerve if I had enough room to swerve left, and I didn't. So my husband did say I swerved. I don't remember swerving, but I had a head-on collision with the deer.
Wow.
My bike flipped. Yeah, we were on a Indian reservation at that point, and I was taken to the reservation for initial triage and wound up being flown back west to Rapid City. I was pretty badly hurt.
Yeah, this is the night before she was going to come and meet me, and she called me from her hospital bed. Does not remember doing that because somehow in her mind and all her pain and everything, she wanted to make sure I knew that she hadn't forgotten about me because she knew how important this trip was. And I was just shocked. And that single event, her calling me from the hospital and me knowing how injured she was because I talked to her husband, it was shocking and has stuck with me because that's who Liz is. That's who she is. She wanted, she had promised to help me, and she wanted to make sure she hadn't forgotten about me. But I would have been fine if she hadn't called me. I mean, my gosh, I'm just like, oh, okay. I hope you're okay. And, I didn't even know what to say. But those kind of things happen sometimes, a deer run into motorcycles or whatever. But yeah, hers was a very, very serious accident. So, and she has recovered from that. She has worked really hard to come back from that. And her solo trip out to meet me was part of that on her bike. A year later, was it, Liz? Probably.
Yeah, almost to the day.
It sounded like that was quite a long recovery process you had to go through then after that.
Yes. And actually, I still am recovering. I still have pain from it, and I probably won't fully heal from it. But my lungs work. I'm able to do what I need to do. So.
And she got back on that damn bike. I was so glad because, sometimes people give things like that up, and it took small steps to get back on it again. But her solo trip out to meet me and then help me do my multi-state trip was part of her recovery. So
I can imagine something like that could be that pivotal moment where I can't do that again. It must take extraordinary courage to get back in the saddle again.
Yeah, I had no desire to ride for several months.
Yeah.
And then it took it took probably almost 2,000 miles for me to even be comfortable again. And I didn't even do my first, because I work an hour from home. That was my first trip by myself, is riding back to work. And it took me, probably wasn't until beginning of June last year, maybe end of May.
So that's some determination. The love of being on your bike sounds like it was enough.
We're crazy.
To get you through that.
We're bike crazy. Yeah.
So you've hinted at already what turned out to be a pretty epic ride.
Epic.
To Keto Fest.
Majorly epic moment in my life. Major.
So tell me how this came about. I mean, Liz, were you always planning to do a solo ride across the Keto Fest, and then Brenda decided, or Brenda came first? How did it come about?
I was planning on doing Keto Fest, and I probably would have ridden. I mean, it's only 4 hours from my house.
Of course, because you're that bit closer, aren't you? Yeah.
But Brenda, it must have been on the KKB. I think maybe we were talking about Keto Fest, and I had suggested that she ride her bike. Why don't you ride out? And and she said that she wouldn't be comfortable not having done a trip like that before. And
I wanted to. I tried to get a few people to do it, but it was always men, and
And so I offered to come out and meet her and ride in with her.
I see. Right. So you had to ride across to meet her and then come back again.
Which worked in well, yeah, because she wanted to do a solo trip.
Well, I didn't want to do it until it came into my head, because I actually thought that figured my husband would be with me for most of it. Then I realized he had a medical conference for himself to be at, so that I would be by myself. And at that point, I had told Brenda I might have opened my mouth too soon. I don't know if I can do this or not. I have the skills. I just didn't know if my mind was there.
Yeah, she had to work through that emotionally.
Well, of course, because that's what we were just talking about. So this seems to be a bit like a massive face your fears challenge.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Much more so for her. Much more so for her.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because they're both massive challenges in themselves. For Liz with more experience, but it's the whole getting back on the horse and facing fears. Mm-hmm. But then Brenda, this was, although you'd done these shorter solo rides, this was a epic challenge and facing your fears for you. I mean,
this is riding a motorcycle halfway across the country.
Exactly. So did you kind of spoke up and said, I want to do it, and then think, oh, what have I done?
I might have mentioned it a few times that was something that I had wanted to do. And then Liz happened to see a comment somewhere and said, why don't you? And I'm like, that's what I said to her, probably, well, I'm just not ready to do something like that by myself. And she's like, well, how about if I do it with you? And I couldn't believe it. I was just like, holy shit, this would be great. Because I knew her well enough to know that she was experienced in multi-state travel. She's experienced mechanic with a bike. And she could mentor me. I knew that she would know what to do. And so I totally relaxed. But I was just so happy that she wanted to do that with me, because I knew if she was with me, I'd be able to do this. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't scary to do it, or I wasn't.
Say you did not totally relax.
Yeah, remember my desk full of all the notes when I was preparing for the trips? I must have had like 30 different notes all over my desk of lists and things I needed to do and checklists and everything. Because a lot of anxiety. I wanted to do it right. I wanted to be safe. And I didn't want to be a burden on her either. But, one of the best things about our trip was the fact that we had communicators. We had helmet communicators. That was definitely something that really saved us, is having that.
That must make a big difference.
Huge.
Otherwise, without them, you're kind of having to read each other's minds a bit and gauge what people are doing by their movements and things. I mean, that must be a huge advantage, being able to talk to each other.
It was fantastic. And she was also my DJ and could play music tracks. And we had a quiet bit of road that they actually can play music over those things. So that was pretty cool. But more important for communicating, because as you can imagine, from Minnesota to Connecticut, there's quite a bit of road changes, quite a bit of exits and different highways and things like that. But also, we need to communicate what's happening. If we needed to stop or whatever.
And how far is it? So, I mean, from a non-American, I have a vague idea of where you were both starting out. But, what kind of distances are we talking about here?
Was it about 1,300 miles for me?
I think Chicago is 1,000 miles from my house.
Okay.
So for you, that would be 14, so 1,600, I think, from Minnesota to Keto Fest.
Right, and then we went up into New York and then down to Connecticut. So who really knows? But
My whole trip, because I went out west, I went to Iowa, Wisconsin. I made it up almost into Minnesota, not quite. And my whole trip wound up being 3,000 miles.
Yeah, she met me at a friend's house in Illinois. I had stayed with Donna Lordy, and then I stayed with my friend Dean, and she met me at my friend Dean's house, and then we left the next morning.
Right, and so that's where your trips converged and you started out together.
That's where we met each other for the first time.
Yeah. And for the first time. It's weird that, isn't it? When you've been talking to someone online for so long and you get to know them really well, but you've never actually met in person.
Yeah, I mean, we talked on the phone and things like that, but that was, and I remember her pulling up in the driveway and and I just want to run out there and hug her, but she's trying to get off her bike and get her thoughts in order, Yeah, it was cool.
And so tell me a bit also about doing this massive trip, which takes a lot of strength and a lot of guts. But then you decided to add another layer on top of that and fast at the same time because of Dave's protocol at Keto Fest.
Dave Feldman had a protocol for Keto Fest, and I love to fast. I'd been fasting for a couple of years. I had comfortably done 10-day, 5-day water fasts, and monthly, at least a 4-day. So I knew how to manage it, or so I thought. And It's a whole different aspect that became involved on this trip with fasting. We'll get into that, but yeah, I wanted to participate in the protocol. I very much support Dave's work. I'm very excited by the things that he's discovered with manipulating lipids, and so I signed up for his protocol. And I told him I'm going to see if I can do this. If at any time I don't feel like I'm handling the bike or my concentration or my physical at all, I'll stop. Because there's, when you're on a motorcycle, you don't screw around. You everything has to, you have to have your physical strength and your mental clarity. And if it didn't work, I was going to stop. But Liz wanted to try it with me. So Liz started fasting when we took off too that day. Yeah.
Yeah, because I had just started fasting at that time. Well, yeah, I'd done 3-day fasts before, so I figured, give it a shot.
It's one point actually that just when you said that about the focus and the clarity of mind that's necessary for a bike, and I must admit I have no experience with riding bikes at all, but obviously you see them on the road, and I always think the concentration levels must always have to be on point. It's the kind of thing, it's a bit like, it's different, but it's like me when I'm handling the kind of really dangerous machinery like a chainsaw.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and
it's that kind of focus. Yep.
I will not do it past a certain period of time when I know I start getting tired, because that's when you make mistakes, isn't it? And that's when, if you've got a chainsaw, you can cut your leg off, and people do actually do that. And if you're on a bike, well, all sorts of things can happen. But have you found a real difference in your riding capability with keto? Because presumably, if your clarity of mind has improved with the ketones, you must have noticed that a bit on your bikes.
I love riding fasted.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed. I don't need to, because I generally wear a Camelback. I wear a drink bag on my back, so I don't need to stop to drink, but I don't need to stop to eat. Something that Sam and I would pretty routinely have is we wouldn't snack while we were on the road. So generally every other day we wind up being exhausted about 3:00 in the afternoon because we needed more fuel. And that never, ever happens to me anymore. I never go through those periods.
I think it actually makes riding safer because you don't get weak and you don't get foggy headed on keto. Yeah, I absolutely feel stronger. And I love riding fasted.
That's what I was thinking. It must, if it improves your clarity of mind, it can't do anything but make your riding safer.
Which is what we pretty much I discovered on this trip. Liz, you fasted what? You got about to hour 24, right?
Yeah, right about 24 hours.
And we talked about it, that we would stop if it wasn't working.
Yeah. And I think we had stopped to get gas. And I had the map up on my phone, and I had a hard time figuring out which way I was supposed to turn out to get the gas station, which is, I've done this a million times. So for me, it's like, okay. I felt fine, but it was obvious my brain was having some issues. So we pulled off into a parking lot, and I had some nuts.
This is different than a regular fast that you've done. We were not only fasting, we were, this is a feat of physical endurance. There's no, make no mistake about it. This road trip, and how many miles we do a day? Like 300-400?
Yeah, I think minimum 4.
The physical endurance involved was huge, which is what I'll get into what happened to me later in my fast. But yeah, she didn't feel like she was doing quite that right. And who knows why, but I'm sure because she's fasted before, but she was just smart and said, okay, I'm going to stop. And I'm like, okay. And of course, I'm totally cool with that because she knows herself. And I felt a little guilty because I was still flying high and doing great. I had keto aid in my I think I put iced tea in there a couple times, but I brought all my powders with, and I would make keto aid and put it in my Camelback, my water bag that I carry on my back. It's got a tube that comes over your shoulder and goes up into your helmet. Yeah. So while you're riding, you can bite that and drink it. Yeah. And so we would fill that up at I'd throw in handfuls of salt. Okay, not handfuls, but you know what I mean? We were very careful about hydrating, and
that sounds really handy. So you haven't actually got to stop to drink. You can have it continuously going all the time. Yeah. But you'd also bought a bit of a backup fuel source with you, hadn't you, Liz? I seem to remember your experiments, and you're making pemmican for the trip.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about that.
I was looking for portable things that aren't going to spoil. I knew I was going to be in some heat.
Of course, because it was middle of summer, wasn't it?
Right. Yep. And I knew that I was going to be camping, so I wasn't going to have access to refrigeration. So I wanted something that would stay stable for a while. So I researched pemmican recipes and dehydrated some beef. And at the time, I wasn't as much, I was bothered by higher fat. So mine was a slightly lower fat and it looked like baby poo.
It did. It looked like a big giant turd in the bag. It did. But she made that to have on her solo trip from New York out west to meet me. And then, so that was part of her road fuel along with bacon. Yep.
Presumably, actually, when it's really hot like that, you don't want too high a fat content in it anyway, purely from a stabilizing, spoiling point of view. You know, if it's really hot, that sucker's just going to melt, isn't it?
It surprisingly stayed together in a
really.
Yeah, if you go to our blog, which you're going to put a link after this podcast, so they can go look at some pictures. Yeah, there's a picture of her holding up her bag of pemmican, which had kind of congealed into a big ball, and me holding up my water bag full of my electrolytes, and it looked like pee. So it looked like we're holding up a bag of pee and a bag of poo. Yeah, it looked really bad, but yeah, that's what we survived on.
But it actually tasted quite good.
Yes, it's very tasty.
Oh, yeah. Well, she fed it to everybody at Keto Fest. Well, we'll get to that.
So what happened then along the way, Brenda? You said you ran into a few problems.
I did run into a few problems. I had prided myself on being able to manage my electrolytes very well. I mean, I'd been ketogenic over 3 years and felt that I could manage that really well. But what I didn't take into consideration is that I was in a completely new situation. I was being physically taxed to a point that I had never been before. And in the middle of the night, Liz was exhausted and she fell asleep. She feels guilty about it, but I keep telling her, don't feel guilty. I got on the Slack channel with the 2 Keto Dudes crew.
But you need to talk about what happened before that. So you had added stress on top of it. That's when your tire went. That's when you had the flat. That was that night.
Okay, yeah. All right. So I had a flat tire.
On the highway.
Getting onto the highway ramp. And this is...
And those can be, I mean, those are quite scary in a car.
It could be.
You lose control. So on a bike...
I was very lucky. We were on a highway entrance ramp. I knew that my rear tire felt squishy, and we have the communicators. I said, Liz, something's not right. I'm pulling over, which is great because she would have got on the highway and had to double back or whatever. And so it was an extremely hot day. It was 90 degrees with 90-degree humidity. And luckily we were in some shade. Lots of people stopped to offer to help, but we had AAA. Liz, she's so smart, man. The first thing I want to do is call AAA. Well, she knows what to do because she's been on trips like this and has lost a tire. She said, no, first we need to find the tire. Then we take the bike to where the tire is because my tire is not that common. It's a bit unique. And so she found a tire, 60 miles, 90 miles away?
Well, and obviously you can't carry a spare around like you can in a car.
Yeah, right, exactly. So we had to AAA it up there and get the tire put on, and we're off the next morning. But that night, I had horrendous leg cramps. And this is with all the supplementing that I've been doing with salt, magnesium malate, a good form of magnesium, my Keto Aid, that has a little bit of potassium. I had been really on top of that, but what I didn't understand is that because I was so extremely physically taxed, I was using up all the magnesium. And the person that explained this to me was Tom Seast. Tom, I went to the 2 Keto Dudes Slack channel and I said, you guys, I'm going to have to break my fast. I didn't want to. I don't know how many days into it, and I wanted to make it to Connecticut. And the only problem I had was these leg cramps. I said, I'm going to break it if I can't figure out these cramps to stop. And Tom C. said, he explained to me how, because I was all this physical endurance that I was pushing myself to such a point, I had literally used up the magnesium and I needed even more. And as soon as I took it, I was fine. So Tom, he called me. He called me on the phone because he had my number because I'd gone and stayed with him in Illinois a few times. Called me on the phone at 4:30 in the morning to help me. So that's a friend. You know what I'm saying? So
he's a great guy.
He's a great guy. And so after that, I was fine. And I made it all the way to Keto Fest fasted. But I'll tell you what, never think you know everything, because I thought I could manage my electrolytes just fine. And there are situations where it's going to change.
So that's interesting. So you just needed to up it by, how much? How much more did you need to take on top of, what kind of level were you on already and what did you need to push it up to?
I don't remember back that far a year ago.
I think you took 2 of my, because I carry magnesium oxides. I think you were out and I gave you 2 of my oxides.
Right. So I had been taking extra and had used up everything that I had brought with. So I tripled it. I tripled whatever I was taking.
Wow.
So I think I knew about 400 milligrams is what is normally recommended. And I was taking that, but then I tripled that. And then I had no more cramps, except for my hand right near the end.
Yeah.
But that was different. We were riding through a storm, and about the last 100 miles into Carl's house, my hand was cramping. But that wasn't from electrolytes. That was just from
Wet, cold gloves.
Yeah, it was terrible.
So I was going to say, this is the middle of summer. We're talking, third week of July, and you ended up in the last part of your journey, driving through pouring rain and a storm. Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
In rural Massachusetts. I wanted to take her off the main drag so she could feel New England.
It was beautiful. I loved it. Didn't I, Liz? I'm back there, right?
Yeah.
And the rain is like driving so hard at our face mask. We could barely see. And we're got the communicators. And I'm like, Liz, I'm having the best time. And I'm serious. It was just the greatest thing. These little windy roads through these beautiful little towns. And in the driving rain, there was some lightning at some point. We had to pull over. But I loved it.
And of course, by that time, you'd presumably found a lot more confidence because you'd had these 1,000-odd miles already. So, by the time you get those much more challenging conditions, presumably you're feeling a lot more confident to deal with it.
I don't know if I've ever driven and ridden in a rainstorm that was that tough. That driving rain was that tough. There were times I had to lift my windshield on my helmet just a little bit so I could see better. And so then the rain came in. Yeah.
Wow.
So we were totally drenched at Carl's house. Sorry, Kelly. We dripped all over Kelly's hardwood floors. But I'm telling you what, we were just complete soaked sponges when we walked in his house. And Liz has got a video of me literally pouring water out of my boot.
So that was it. So you got there, you arrived at Carl's place, and of course then dove straight into Keto Fest.
Oh yeah.
Dave's took part in Dave's protocol and Keto Fest. You must have been on a bit of a high.
Oh, we worked so hard that weekend. But, of course, we were excited to meet people. I got to hug Siobhan for the first time. Oh, yeah. And, the VIP party. The VIP party was fantastic. And that's when Liz, she got the pemmican that she had. She had a good tray full of it left. And we refrigerated that and got it nice and firm and cut it into little squares. And we walked around the VIP party, sharing that with people, telling them what it was. Who are some of the people that tried that?
I think most people did. I know I have pictures of you. Yeah, because you fed it to them because I don't like talking to people. So you fed it to them and then I took pictures of you feeding it to them.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good setup. Yeah, get Brenda to do the making people eat it and you can stay in the background taking pictures.
Yep.
Yeah. So a lot of the speakers, I know Dr. Feynman tried it and liked it. There was a lot of
Ivor.
Yeah, they
Dr. Westman.
Right, because there were like a lot of us in the keto community were really curious, and we like to try new things, and they were way into it. So that was fun, telling them what it was and what she had made it for, and
then what happened about getting back? Because I don't think you got a lift on the way back, didn't you?
Yeah, my brother ended up coming to Keto Fest, which is fantastic. My brother has adopted keto now, and my older brother has also reversed his diabetes. It took him 3 years to finally listen to me, but all of a sudden, like about a month before Keto Fest, he said, "I'm coming," and I said, "Okay, great." And he has a big truck, so I just put my bike in the back, and we traveled together, which is another opportunity for us to spend a couple days together. We don't see each other enough, so yeah, my brother reverses diabetes as well with keto, and loved Keto Fest. Jumped right in, was working there with everybody else. Liz and him got along like gangbusters. Yeah. So that was really fun that my brother was there.
Fantastic. And of course, we're all meeting up this year at Keto Fest. Mm-hmm. Can't wait.
Oh, absolutely.
And how are you getting there this year, Brenda? Are you going to be going across on your motorbike again this year or?
Possibly. Although I think I won't do a protocol this time. I think I'd rather feast on the way there. So try and see what that's like. Right. So, but we'll see.
And Liz, you were saying you're a bit closer anyway, so you probably ride there, do you?
Yeah, unless they're calling for hurricane remnants that week or something, I'll ride.
Yeah, her and her husband are riding in. So wait till you see these bikes, Daisy. You need to take a look at these bikes. The KLR, they call it the Jeep of the motorcycle world. They're not as common as some of the other bikes you'll see. It's not a cruiser with all the chrome. Matter of fact, we like to leave them dirty. It's not a crotch rocket, those zippy little tiny bikes.
The Swiss utility bike.
It is. It looks like an overgrown dirt bike, but it's like an enduro, if you've heard that word before. But I mean, I'm absolutely in love with it. I've been riding bikes since I was about 9. I had an enduro as a teen. As soon as we're done recording this, it's raining. I don't give a shit. I'm going to be out on my bike. I love it. We had a storm in Minnesota just 10 days ago. I've been waiting to get on my bike. Yeah. So now I get on it I take it to work if I don't have to drive clients. I'm a nut for my motorcycle.
Yeah, I know you always get really frustrated when the snow comes down and the ice packs in, and that's the end of biking for a while.
Yep. Except for the really crazy people who put studs on their tires and ride in the yeah, and there are some KLR people like that.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of them.
Yeah. I'll be out there if there's snow, but not ice on the road. I won't do it. But I will go out if there's snow. Yeah. So yeah, me and Liz are crazy biker chicks. No, we're not biker chicks. No, we ride adventure bikes. We like to go off road a little bit and do a little bit of exploring that way. And our bikes are they're really tough. If you drop over one of those pretty chrome bikes, a piece breaks off. You can throw ours on the ground and pick it back up, and it'll start and go again. They're kind of tough that way.
Well, that's the whole point, I guess. If they're built for off roading as well as on road, they've got to be tough, haven't they?
After hitting a deer and flipping, and I want to say the bike traveled 125 feet on its side when the police did the police report. Had I been able to ride, I could have ridden it home.
Yep, her bike still works. It still works. They're tough little buggers.
The mirrors came off. Just put it back together, use some duct tape to hold things, and it could have been ridden home.
I love her bike. It's really cool. She's got those hard panniers that you put on there. You've got the silver ones on yours, right? Or yours black?
No, mine are black. Okay. The BMW. The bike that I wound up riding to Keto Fest actually wasn't my bike. So the picture that you have of the two bikes, that's my friend's bike. My bike died on the thruway.
Oh no!
Like 30 miles from work.
Yes, but not because it's a bad bike, but because she was still having issues that were residual from her accident a year before. She was still having a few things that were going wrong with it, and in order to meet me, didn't a friend of yours pull over and say, "Hey, you want to take my bike?"
One of my friends actually found me on the side of the highway. He's like, "Huh, that looks like Liz's bike." Oh.
And then found out what she was doing and offered her
and handed me his keys.
So she could meet me. If he hadn't done that, this wouldn't have happened for me. So we are on a timeline. I mean, if he hadn't said, "Hey, take my bike," this wouldn't have happened. So that's an amazing guy. What's his name again?
Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
I was going to say, but I can hear the love in your voices for your bikes. So letting someone else use it does sound like a really big deal. It is
a huge big deal. It's a big deal.
And his bike is really nice, too. His bike is really, really, it's all electronic suspension. It's super nice. So I was a little nervous.
And we talked about you having to be strong to ride these bikes. I mean, you're both into weightlifting, aren't you?
You're doing some of that, Liz, too. Mm-hmm. Plus, you've been doing some running.
Yes, I have been running. That's Daisy's fault.
Mm-hmm.
Bit of couch to 5K, but it sounds like you need those muscles to keep that bike upright.
Yes, a lot of core strength.
Are you signed up for a freaking marathon, Liz? Are you?
No, I'm signed up for a 5K.
Okay, all right.
Oh, you are you? Blimey, well done. I haven't been that brave.
My work does it. It's a fundraiser for us. So I figured that would be something that would keep me running because I enjoy running. I don't understand why. I've never done it, but I enjoy it, and it seems like a minor miracle every time I survive it.
Wow. Because you did have some problems to start with, didn't you, that you had to overcome with it. So that's, again, you sound like someone who's very determined when she puts her mind to doing something.
Yeah, I can be a major pain in the ass.
in a good way.
Oh, let me tell you about something. When we got to Keto Fest, after that weekend was over, At the end of the day on Sunday, the Keto Fest was over and Liz was getting on her bike to ride back to New York. That was when we were going to say goodbye. And I just wanted to mention this. Because we had been together for a week and because we'd been through so much together, we had bonded in a major way. And when she went to get, when she went to get on her bike, that was hard. It was I haven't seen her yet since that day. It's going to be really great to see her again. But I held it together and I hugged her goodbye. And you're going to be putting the picture up of that moment. When I say goodbye to her, that's a picture of us that you'll be putting up on your the photo for the podcast. Anyway, Liz left. I watched her go, and then I literally sat on the steps in front of the Guard Theater and just cried my eyes out for about a half hour. It was hard to separate, and she told me before she left, she said, "You'll never forget a big trip like this. This is, it meant everything to me, Liz. Thank you."
You're welcome. I'm so glad you were able to experience it.
And then I went
safely
home and rode down to the Ozark Mountains by myself. That's what confidence does for you. I came home for one day.
And that's something I told her, that I was just like, you're going to get through the first 24 hours and it's going to be like nothing. You're going to be fine.
Yep. I went home one day of repacking and I went all the way down to southern Missouri in the Ozarks for 10 days, stopped and stayed with Tom Cease, Tammy Kidd, a solo bike trip by myself down there in the mountains. So I was, I was going for it. I was confident. I knew what to do. I had a good mentor.
Exactly. Well, it does sound pretty epic, and I know there are things we haven't had time to get to, but we have got to wrap it up now, sadly. But perhaps we could finish with a top tip from you guys.
Oh, yes. The top tip has everything to do with what happened on the trip to me. It has to do with electrolytes. Don't ever think you know everything about it. Anything could happen. Stress, physical exertion in my case. I just didn't understand what was happening. And I'm glad I reached out for help. Tom Cease is a good teacher. He explained to me what was happening and why I needed more magnesium. So electrolytes are extremely important when you're on the ketogenic diet and fasting. And I was both. I had been fasting. So keep an eye on your electrolytes, pay attention to your body, and make adjustments according to what's going on in your life.
Exactly. I think that seems to be the really important takeaway from what you were saying. Like you say, you had a really good handle on your electrolytes. You knew what you were doing with it. You've been fasting for a number of years. You've got the balance right, but you did something that threw that balance out and realized that you need to adapt in the moment.
Yeah, and I didn't realize it until Tom pointed it out. So definitely have to keep an open mind that we never stop learning in this. We're never going to stop learning. We have to always be open to that and be learning.
Absolutely. And Liz, is this a joint top tip or have you got another one for us?
Nope, it's a joint top tip. Because that's something that I found too, is that even when I think that I have a lock on something and get how it works, that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes I need to step back and revise my opinion on what works for me.
Perfect. Well, ladies, it's been really exciting listening to this story. I have to say, I've sort of been on the edge of my seat wondering what's going to happen next. So I'm sure everyone who's listening is going to feel the same way.
Yeah, now I want to go on another road trip. So that's all
Yes.
all this has done for me is stirred it all up and now I want to go.
Well, we'll enjoy hearing about what that next road trip is.
Oh yeah, maybe Keto Fest, I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. Keep us posted. Thank you so much, Brenda.
Thank you, Daisy.
It's been wonderful. And Liz, thank you very much.
Thank you, Daisy.
To get the resources and links from the show, please go to ketowomanpodcast.com. Are you my next extraordinary woman? Maybe you've got an idea for a show, a topic you want to hear about. Let me know how I can tickle your earbuds by dropping me a line at daisy@ketowomanpodcast.com. If you fancy joining me on this exciting adventure and want to help me create new episodes, please go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/ketowoman or simply hit the support button on the Keto Woman Podcast website. It's thanks to the two keto dudes that I'm hosting this podcast. So please consider heading to their Patreon page at patreon.2keto.com and help them bring you more podcasts like this one. Please help other people hear about and find this podcast by reviewing the show on iTunes and Facebook. Every star and review really does help. It doesn't go unnoticed by me, the people who regularly like, share and comment on my posts. Your support means the world to me. Thank you. This week's end quote is from, well, I have two again this week because I couldn't choose between them. The first is from Stacey Westfall. On a bike, no one ever asks, "Are we there yet?" And the second is author unknown. Only a biker knows why a dog sticks his head out of a car window. Bye-bye, Keto Lovelies.